Alright fellas, the other day when I was watching the Tszyu fight, I saw Keith Thurman on the broadcast and I sat back and was like, damn, I haven't seen him for a minute. And then, wait a second, wasn't he meant to fight Tim Tszyu? And then I started thinking, what actually ever happened to Keith Thurman? How did he go from the biggest fight of his life against Pacquiao to disappearing off the face of the earth? Now, it's felt like Thurman has been around for ages, yet he's only 35. He was once known as one of the most skilled and entertaining fighters in the welterweight division. His combination of power, speed, and ring intelligence made him a real threat that would earn him some of his most high-profile fights. So why did he just disappear after being the star of some of the biggest fights of his generation? To go back a moment and remind ourselves of what he was known for, how about that high-stakes clash against Shawn Porter? Known for his relentless aggression and granite chin, Porter pressured Thurman from the opening bell, forcing him to show resilience and skill under intense conditions. Thurman rose to the challenge, and his unanimous decision win over Porter solidified his reputation as a top welterweight, with the fight earning acclaim as a Fight of the Year contender. Following this, Thurman vs Danny Garcia in a highly anticipated title unification bout, with both fighters entering undefeated. Thurman controlled the fight with his sharp footwork and calculated aggression, neutralizing Garcia's famous counterpunches. In a close split decision win, Thurman unified the WBA and WBC welterweight titles, marking the pinnacle of his career. This victory cemented his place at the top of the welterweight division. However, just as he reached his peak, Thurman was about to face one of his toughest opponents yet: injuries. The first major injury occurred in early 2017, shortly after his victory over Danny Garcia. Thurman was dealing with a nagging elbow issue that required surgery, forcing him to take a lengthy break from the sport. Although he initially aimed to recover quickly, the rehabilitation process was more challenging than expected. What was supposed to be a few months on the sidelines turned to almost a year. Yet he returned to face Josecito Lopez in 2019 and won that fight by decision. Although unfortunately, injuries continued to plague Thurman. The most significant impact of these injuries was a noticeable shift in his fighting style. Before, Thurman had relied on his explosive power and relentless approach, but post-injury, he was forced to adapt to a more cautious style. Thurman, once known for his one-time knockout power, was clearly fighting differently. In 2019, Keith Thurman took a bold step by facing the boxing legend Manny Pacquiao in a fight that was meant to be his grand return to the spotlight. Despite the layoffs and injuries, Thurman entered the ring confident, viewing the Pacquiao fight as a chance to reclaim his status as an elite welterweight. This was a great fight, yet ultimately he fell short, losing a close split decision. After his defeat to Manny Pacquiao in 2019, Keith Thurman's journey back to boxing's elite ranks has been tough. After this fight, it was almost silence on the boxing front for a couple years until Thurman returned to the ring against Mario Barrios after a 30-month layoff in February of 2022. Though he won by unanimous decision, this performance showed signs of ring rust, but also highlighted his experience and skills, reaffirming his capacity to stay competitive when healthy. This victory also put him in place for a title challenge, with this fight being a title eliminator for the WBC. Now, this fight would be his last fight to date, but people don't realize he's been trying to fight. After this fight, Errol Spence was ordered to defend his championship against Thurman, but then he got in a car accident, and once Spence was healthy, they were able to make the Crawford Undisputed fight. So the Thurman fight just faded off into obscurity. So after this, who do they look towards? Well, Ugas seemed to be next. The WBC ordered this bout to happen, but for some reason it just didn't happen. Then the Stanionis fight was rumoured, and this still didn't happen. One of the other notable things that happened during this period was Clarissa Shields calling out Thurman weirdly to a fight, and then Thurman agreeing to it. Although it of course didn't happen, it was really the only thing that got Thurman in the headlines in 2023. Then after all of this, he was finally scheduled to face the rising star Tim Tszyu in early 2024. This fight marked Thurman's step into a new weight class at 154 pounds. This was one of the biggest fights Thurman could have got at the time. With boxing politics getting in the way for over 18 months, the ease of making this bout made it a no-brainer. The press conferences took place and it looked like it was set to go. Yet only 12 days before the fight, Keith Thurman had to pull out due to a bicep tear in his right arm, which he had to have immediate surgery on. I reckon this fight would have been interesting. I think Tszyu pre-Fundora was a different fighter to what we saw in his last bout, and I reckon this matchup would have been a fascinating watch. Tszyu would go on to face Fundora and lose a split decision, which although this loss wasn't really seen to lessen his market value, and instead of rescheduling the Thurman fight, they went on to try and verse IBF champion Bakram Murtazaliev. Now Thurman was involved in the broadcast, yet during fight week he did try to call out Tim Tszyu again, telling him to sign the contract. Yet no one seemed to tell Thurman that Tszyu was set to face Erickson Lubin if he won, and their idea of facing Thurman was now long gone. So now we know what's going on with Thurman, what's next? Well, that's a pretty hard question to answer. He's obviously still tied to PBC, and the trouble they've given him over the last couple years to make fights doesn't set a good precedent. With the Lubin Tszyu fight now being cancelled, could we see Tszyu face Thurman as a comeback fight? Well, quite possibly. Yet if big names and big fights is what Thurman wants, there are not too many names tied to PBC in the 147 pound division. Although outside of PBC, I would love to see Conor Benn versus Thurman. I would just want to see it for the trash talk. He could probably continue his plan and move up a division. Other than Tszyu, PBC still has Spence and Fundora in their stable, which both would be interesting fights. Think about it, if Spence doesn't fight Fundora, Spence is coming off the Crawford loss, Thurman hasn't fought in a couple years, also the history's there. It's not a bad matchup. Although even if we don't see Thurman back in the ring, he has already had a legendary run with many legendary fights. Yet clearly he's been crippled from reaching his true potential through injuries and promotional limitations. But that's enough from me. I want to now hear what you think could be next for Keith Thurman and what has been some of your favourite moments of his career. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, it does a ton to help the channel. But thanks for watching fellas, I'll catch you in the next one.